Hello and welcome to Global Eye, where we bring you up to speed with all the big international stories. First up, US and China seem to have declared a short ceasefire in trade tensions. President Trump has decided to delay imposing additional tariffs on $250 billion worth of Chinese goods from the 1st of October to the 15th of October. This after China decided not to increase tariffs on 16 types of US products, including anti-cancer drugs, lubricants and animal feed ingredients. Trump called it a big move and a positive gesture. The US president says he's looking at a comprehensive deal but doesn't rule out an interim one either. US and China will soon meet for negotiations. Let's get a perspective from Yang Xu, senior fellow at Chinese Institute of International Studies. He's joining us from Beijing. Mr. Xu, President Trump has decided to postpone additional tariffs by 2 weeks after China decided to exempt certain US products from a tariff increase. Will talks now move in a positive direction?
First of all, the latest positive interactions from both sides really provide a good gestures between each other for the upcoming very tough, very difficult negotiations. The gestures are far from enough on one hand, but on the other hand, the baby steps from the both sides really reduced the mutual distrust, mutual suspicions, and improved the atmosphere for the upcoming negotiations. So basically, U.S. government's latest move, President Trump described it as a good gesture of goodwill, is really positive to the market. Also can be translated to Chinese side as a positive gesture. It works for China to do the corresponding measures, although the gesture is quite limited. As you mentioned, the postpone just about 2 weeks. This really open a limited window of opportunities. And that means 2 weeks later, if negotiation goes nowhere, then the tariffs will be put down. So that will, on one hand, indicate the U.S. limited positive gesture, but on the other hand, they remain hoping, expecting the tariffs as a leverage to force China to accept their condition about in the negotiation. So upcoming negotiation will be very sensitive.
And in your opinion, do these developments indicate that both sides will arrive at a trade deal anytime soon?
I don't think the two sides will make a deal in a short period, simply because of the negotiation covering so many sensitive items that the two sides, the two teams cannot solve every problems in a short period. However, under the two presidents from China and the U.S. determination, I'm confident at last the two teams will be able to strike a deal based on the mutual respected and mutual benefit and equal footing. So in short period, we cannot get a deal. We should not expect a deal. But with some time, I firmly believe the two teams, on behalf of the two states, will make a great deal, not only for the two countries, but also for the world economy as a whole.
All right, thank you for joining us, Yang Xu of Chinese Institute of International Studies. And staying with the United States, President Trump fired his security advisor John Bolton this week because of strong disagreements with him on a number of national security issues. Bolton is the third NSA to leave the Trump administration. Bolton was seen as a war hawk who favored a tougher stance against Iran, North Korea, Russia, and also opposed Trump's plan to host Taliban leaders at Camp David. Let's discuss this with Professor John Gans, somebody who has worked in the U.S. administration, in the Office of the Speaker of the United States, also in the Pentagon. John Bolton had a turbulent 17 months in office, John Gans. Is his exit good in a way? Was his presence hampering decision-making at the White House?
Well, I think what I would argue and what I argue in some of the writing I've done, and base that on a history I read of the National Security Council from President Harry Truman to President Donald Trump, is that at the end of the day, the United States has largely made decisions through a pretty formalized process of meetings and memoranda for almost 70 years. And at the end of the day, John Bolton helped dismantle a lot of that process. So, and made himself the only person sort of between Donald Trump and the government, Donald Trump and his decisions. And so in some ways, that complicated Donald Trump's life, right? Because John Bolton and Donald Trump didn't agree on everything. So what has actually happened is that while decision-making might be easier for Donald Trump because he doesn't have to deal with anybody he disagrees with, it also means that Donald Trump really gets to make these decisions with a very little structure around him at all, because John Bolton has basically dismantled that process. And so at the end of the day, I think that the decision-making might become easier for Donald Trump, but it doesn't mean that the decisions are going to be better for the United States or the rest of the world.
Also, the president was planning to have Taliban leaders over at Camp David, and this was a point of contention between John Bolton and Donald Trump. This would all happen around the 9/11 anniversary. How is this being seen in U.S. politics?
Well, I mean, I think, this is one of those things that we really never got to test, in part because most Americans probably weren't tracking very deeply any negotiations with the Taliban or broader negotiations on the Afghan war. But the second reason is because Donald Trump really only announced this idea when he canceled it. And so we don't really get to know how popular it would have been, how it would have been received, because it was sort of announced over a weekend and in a way that sort of suggested that it was probably a lot less likely to happen. My hunch, and I think the hunch of a lot of people who have been following American politics for the last 20 years, is that it probably wouldn't have been very popular in the broader sense of meeting with people and meeting with representatives of a party and a force that we've been, exchanging hostile fire with for almost 20 years. And to a degree, I think around the 9/11 anniversary would have been seen by some as very insensitive. That said, I think the American people are frustrated by how long the war in Afghanistan has gone on, and I think President Donald Trump has rightly seen that and worked to try and win that side of the population over to his side.
And finally, President Trump has cancelled peace talks after an American soldier was killed in an attack by the Taliban. He has vowed to hit Taliban even harder. Are talks really dead now?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I would say is that the one thing that we all have learned over the past 2 years is, it's hard to know what's true, right? And it's hard to know what's true coming out of the White House these days, and especially as chaotic as the U.S. administration has been. And so I think one of the challenges will be for any peace talks, whether they're still ongoing or not, is the credibility of the American side of the negotiations, in the sense that it will be very difficult for any commitments to be made that will be believed if they can be blown up by presidential tweet and to a degree resisted so aggressively. I don't think there's ever been a real clarity on how close we were, how many people were on the side, what the Afghan government thought of, what the Taliban was thinking, what the U.S. government thought of, because this all has happened so quietly, happened so far behind the scenes, but also happened so quickly in the sense that the American president has been so quickly and publicly canceled these talks. So I don't think anybody knows where things stand, but my bet is that if there's any hope for progress, it's going to be difficult because of credibility damage on all sides.
All right, so there's a credibility damage on all sides. Thanks very much, Professor John Gans, for joining us on Global Eye. Moving on, the big story from the energy space. Saudi Arabia's King Salman has replaced his energy minister, Khalid Al-Falih, with one of his own sons, Prince Abdulaziz bin Salman. This is seen as a move to expedite the public offering of the world's biggest oil company, Saudi Aramco. Falih was seen to be resisting the pace of reforms to diversify the Saudi economy and reduce dependence on fossil fuels. Aramco, according to reports, is looking at a sale of 1% stake by November and has also selected banks for the process. The valuation of this 1% stake, according to experts, would be $1.5 trillion. Let's get in Herman Wong of S&P Global Platts. Herman, thanks very much for speaking to CNBC TV 18. Our first question. Saudi Arabia replacing their oil minister and kick-starting the process of launching an IPO. What do these two developments signify?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me on. Well, the new oil minister or the new energy minister for Saudi Arabia, Prince Abdulaziz bin Salman, he's a longtime veteran of Saudi oil policy, and he's been a fixture in Saudi Arabia's OPEC delegation. He's a big believer in the role of OPEC in helping monitor the oil markets and helping regulate the oil markets. And you saw just at Thursday's OPEC Plus monitoring committee meeting that he's got a lot of influence in the organization. He got two of the OPEC's least compliant members in terms of their production quotas to commit publicly to lowering their productions to be in line with their quotas and stop free riding on the back of Saudi Arabia's market balancing efforts. So, if you're an investor in Aramco, I'm sure you're quite positively you feel quite positive about the role of Saudi Arabia in OPEC and the role that Prince Abdulaziz has within OPEC. Saudi Arabia is the de facto leader of the organization. It pumps 1/3 of the crude that OPEC produces, and so the fact that he was able to get these two countries to commit to playing ball with the rest of OPEC and stop free riding, that's got to be a comfort for a potential Aramco investor.
And also, Herman, finally, what will Aramco's IPO mean for Saudi Arabian economy and global crude prices?
Sure. Well, the IPO is a centerpiece, you can say, of the kingdom's economic transformation effort. They've been trying to diversify their economy away from oil revenues, and ironically, one of the ways they need to do this is by IPOing their state oil company and using that money to fund some of the other efforts to build more different industries and create jobs and reduce its subsidies on energy. So it's a very important thing for the kingdom to get right, and they're trying to find the right timing for it, the right venue for it. Reports are that they are accelerating the process of this to get this company listed. Now, in terms of the global oil market, one of the big features of Saudi Arabia is that it's a swing producer. It's seen its role as a swing producer. That means that it maintains a spare production capacity that they've held offline to use in emergencies when there's a market supply squeeze. And that helps regulate the market, helps reduce volatility. Big question for investors is, once it's a publicly traded company, will it maintain this spare capacity? They say they have about 2.5 million barrels per day of spare capacity. It's expensive to maintain, and it's a lot to ask shareholders to keep funding this capacity that you're purposely keeping offline. And the Saudis have indicated that their oil policy will continue, that they will continue their important role as a swing producer. But as you sell shares into the public market, will shareholders stand for this? I think that's a big question for the market.
Herman Wong, thanks very much for speaking to CNBC TV 18 and putting that story in perspective for our viewers. With that, we take a short break here on Global Eye, but up next, we get you the latest on Israel elections and negotiations on the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. Don't go anywhere.